So that is our topic for the day. Different ways of invoking Apex. All right. So what are the different ways of invoking Apex? One is anonymous code block. Anonymous code block is you can just write a code block and you can execute it. Okay. So that's what an anonymous code block works. Just to write a code block and execute it. And you don't have to save it in a class, or you don't have to create a method or anything. Nothing is required. That's anonymous code block. Next is Apex triggers. Okay, what is Apex trigger? Apex trigger is a code which you want to execute before or after a DML statement or a DML operation. DML operation is insert, update, delete. These are DML operations. Okay, so a code that you want to execute before or after a DML operation, that's Apex trigger. Then visual force classes, the controllers that we have seen, right? So that's one way of invoking Apex. Then there is asynchronous Apex. Asynchronous Apex is something which I'll come a little later. We'll talk about that in details. So firstly, we start with anonymous code block. Okay, anonymous code block. What is anonymous code block? An anonymous block is Apex code that does not get stored in the metadata. So this is the Apex code that you don't need to save in a class or anything, right? So otherwise, whenever we are writing, uh, whenever we are writing a controller for the visual force page, what do? We save it in the class, right? The code gets saved. Why are we saving the code and the methods and everything? Why do we need to save that? How does that help?
To reuse it.
Sorry?
To reuse it whenever to
Reuse it.
reuse the code.
Right. Reuse. Because that's a code which you will require again and again, and that's the reason why you save it. Correct. But in case you have a piece of code which needs to be used only once, okay, and the next time when you use it, that code needs to be updated or changed or something. In that case, it makes more sense for you to not save it. Instead of saving it, just execute it once and just let it be. That's it. We don't need to save it, right? So that's where we will use anonymous code block. So an anonymous block is Apex code that does not get stored in the metadata, but that can be compiled and executed using developer console. So you want to execute the code, but you don't want to save it in the metadata. So I'll show you how can we actually execute that code with the developer console. You can use anonymous blocks to quickly evaluate Apex on the fly, or to write code that changes dynamically at runtime. So in case you quickly want to check some Apex code that you have written, that's one place where you can use this anonymous code block, or to write the code that changes dynamically at runtime. So if there is a code which dynamically changes on runtime, for that code also you can use anonymous code block. Okay, so anonymous code block. Just give me 1 second. Let me log in into Salesforce. Okay. So to write an anonymous code block, all that you need to do is you just need to go to developer console. You need to click on your name and there you will find developer console. In that you can write the anonymous code block. Where do you write it? Go to debug, open execute anonymous window. This is the window where you can write the code, anonymous code. Okay. Let's say account A equals new account, name equals uh, anonymous account, insert A. Okay, these two lines of code, I just don't want to save these two lines of code, I just want to execute it. So you can quickly do that from here. Okay, here is the code I've written. Click on execute. This gets executed. Okay, there was an error. Account, it should be account. Okay, execute. So ideally, what should this code do? It should create an account in the database. Insert an account in the database. Let's see if the account has got created. Yes, it has got created. So this is the account that got created just now. Got it? So that's how you can actually write any code and execute it from the anonymous code block. But this code did not get saved anywhere. It did not get saved in the class or anywhere. Fine. So that's about anonymous code block. Now we'll move into the next thing, which is Apex trigger.
Jeet,
Yep.
will you teach us creating a custom button on Force page later?
Acha, custom button on Visual Force page is what we did not do the other day, right?
Yeah.
We'll do it, no problem.
अच्छा
Since we have
जी,
started this topic, so no point breaking it in between. But maybe
ठीक
start of next session we can do that.
अच्छा जी, okay,
Okay,
thanks.
good. Thanks for reminding. Okay, now comes the Apex trigger. So what is Apex trigger? Apex trigger is again a code block, Apex code, which gets executed before or after a DML operation. Now what's a DML operation? DML is, what is DML? Anyone? What does DML stand for? A
Data
lot of people
manipulation
don't know.
language.
Data manipulation language.
Manipulation language.
Okay. What does that mean? For a layman who does not know what data manipulation language means, what exactly that mean? Or what does a DML operation mean? Anyone? What does a DML operation mean? Any operation where the data manipulation is happening. Either the data is being inserted or updated or deleted. Fine. So this insert, update, delete and delete, these are the operations where data manipulation happens. So these are the DML operations. Got it? So an apex trigger is something which will get executed before or after the DML operation. Okay, sometimes you want to put a logic to get executed before a record is created into the system. Sometimes you want to execute a logic after a record is created into the system. Got it? That's something which you can do with a trigger. Um, to some extent a little similar to the validation rule kind of thing, but not validation rule exactly. I'm just trying to give you a little similar example. So validation rule is a little similar to apex trigger, but apex trigger is much more powerful. Okay, because here you have the control, you are writing the program, you can do whatever you want, you can control it the way you want, right? Okay, so what is apex trigger? An apex trigger is apex code that executes before or after the following types of operations: insert, update, delete, and delete. So these are all DML operations. So an apex code that gets executed before or after this. So for executing this, you don't have to click on any save button, or you don't have to call a page or anything. The moment you are saving the record, or the moment you are updating or deleting the record, that time it will automatically be called. Okay. When do you want to call it? That you have to define. Whether you want the trigger to work before insert or before delete, that's something that you will have the option to define. Right. So there are two types of triggers, two types of apex triggers. Before triggers are used to update or validate record values before they are saved to the database. After triggers are used to access field values that are set by the system and to effect changes in other records. Right? So before triggers, there are two types of triggers. First is before trigger, which is used for validating the data. Okay. After trigger is used for making changes to the related records. Okay. So before trigger will basically be used for validating the data before it is actually saved in the database. After trigger can be used for making changes to the related records after that particular record has been saved into the database, saved or whatever, deleted. The records that fire the after triggers are read only. Okay, the record that fires the after trigger, that record itself becomes read only, and that's the reason why we are talking about making changes in the related records. Related or not related, that will also not be a concern, any other record, because since we are writing the code on our own, we are writing the trigger, you can make changes to something which is not related also. It's completely your control. So that's, these are the two types of triggers. Now let's understand the syntax of the trigger. Let me write it and show it to you. That will be easier for you to understand. Okay, so syntax of the apex trigger is pretty simple. It's written like this: trigger, name of the trigger, whatever name you want to give, on, object name, whatever name, sorry, whichever object you want to create the trigger on, event, what event you want to create the trigger for, and then the code block here. And your code comes here. That's it. That's how simple a trigger is. Okay, so syntax is pretty simple. Let's say you're creating a trigger D1 on opportunity. Before insert. So event basically will define when do you want the trigger to get executed. So here will be the code. That's it. Now in the code you can write whatever you want to do. I mean, you can write a full story. You can write the complete program, what needs to be done, what will happen, and all that stuff. But syntax is this: whatever you want to execute, that needs to be written in the code block. Correct. So this is a trigger T1. This is the name of the trigger. This will be an opportunity, and this trigger will get executed before insert, which means before an opportunity record is created, this code will get executed. That's what it means. Correct. Okay, so let's have a quick look into the events that we are talking about. The trigger syntax we just saw. Where trigger events can be comma separated lists of one or more of the following events. So what all trigger events we have? Let's have a look. Before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete, after undelete. Right? So these are the trigger events that we have. Before a record is inserted, before a record is updated, before a record is deleted, after a record is inserted, after a record is updated, after it is deleted, and after undelete. So these are the different events that we have. Okay, so you can execute trigger on any of these events. Got it? Or multiple of them. So if you have written a code block and you want that trigger to get executed before insert as well as before update, you can do that. So you just have to put a comma. So when I'm talking about this particular example, I can write before update also here. Fine. So trigger T1 on opportunity before insert before update. So we can find it that way. So two events can also be written for the same code. The same code can be executed on two different events also. Depending on your requirement, you will select which event you want the code to get executed on. Clear? Okay. So that's about the syntax. Now we have understood the syntax, we have understood the events. Time for us to start writing a trigger of our own. So let's write a simple trigger. My trigger is to let's say let's say a very simple example we'll take. If industry of an account is education, throw an error. Right. So if the industry of an account is education, I want to throw an error. The record should not get saved, instead it should throw an error. That's what I want to do. So what is the best way of doing that? What is the best way of doing that? Validation rule is the best way, but I'm not doing it through validation rule. I'm going to do it through trigger. So trigger, okay. So this is, the requirement. If the industry of an account is in the education, I want to throw an error and I want to do this using a trigger, apex trigger. So I should write trigger. What will be the trigger name? Anything, whatever you want to put. On, what will be the object here? What will be the object in this case?
Account.
What will be the event?
After save. I mean,
After insert.
sorry.
After insert.
After insert. Yeah.
Out of these events, which event do you think I need to get execute the code on, or which stage I need to check this?
After insert.
After insert. Okay. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
Because this trigger has to get invoked after the record is saved, right, Jeet? Because how will it know what we selected? if you don't save the record.
Before insert. Details before insert.
Before insert or after insert?
Before insert.
Before insert. Someone says after insert. Can you guys just take a minute to read these two lines and then again answer the same question?
Before insert.
Before insert, right? Because once the record has been saved, there is no point checking or validating the data after that. Correct. So if there is a checkpoint or any validation kind of a thing, data validation needs to be done. That should be done before insert. So here the event should be before insert. Asha, I hope that's okay with you as well.
Yes, Jeet.
Okay.
Got it.
Now the code goes in here. Now in this code you have to write all the logic, what exactly you want to do. Okay. So what do I need to do now? What code shall I write here? I have to check whether the uh, industry of the current record or the record in context is education or not, right? That's what I have to do, correct? Now, how do I check that? So for checking the current record or the record in context, we have some context variables. Okay. This context variable called trigger.new. It returns list of records being inserted or updated. Okay, so that's what a context variable is. So there's a context variable called trigger.new. It returns the list of records which are in context, which are being inserted or updated. Got it? So I'll need to use trigger.new for reference. Correct? Because that's the record which I have to check. Correct? The record which is being inserted. So what I need to do is I need to say account A equals trigger.new, and after that I need to write if A equals, sorry, if A dot industry equals education, A dot add error. Add error is the method for throwing an error. Not allowed. Whatever error message you want. This is how it should be, right? Do you understand the logic behind this? I'm checking the record in context. How do I get the record in context with the context variable trigger.new? So these are predefined methods which return you the result of. The trigger.new is a predefined method which returns you the list of records which are being inserted or updated. Correct? Is this clear or we have a doubt on this? Okay, check it once quickly and let me know if you have any
Sir,
question here. Huh.
Is it like we are checking before, means whenever we insert the data, we are checking trigger using trigger.new.
Yes, not using trigger.new, using the trigger. So before any account is created, it will check that record whether the account industry is education or not. Clear? Yes, no, quick.
No, this trigger.new.
Trigger.new is a context variable. ये clearly यहाँ पे लिखा तो हुआ है. Returns list of record which is being inserted or created. If you are creating an account here, IBM phone number and whatever information. So when you click on save, before the record gets saved, trigger.new means the record which you have entered here, which will have the value IBM and all these things. The record in context. Do we understand what is the context? The record which is in context, that is being returned using trigger.new. What is the problem understanding that? We'll have to check that record only, right, which is being inserted, which is in context, or you will check some other record which you inserted last week. Please say yes or no, nothing. I mean, some responses. I'm just asking questions, and again, I'm assuming that you're understanding, not understanding. In case you have doubt, please be a little more responsive while I'm trying to explain your doubts.
Yes, got this point.
पूरा क्लियर हो गया अभी?
हाँ जी.
ठीक है. Good. Anyone else who has a problem or doubt? Everyone is okay.
No, Chief,
No,
I'm
Ji.
good.
Okay, good.
Yeah, fine.
देखो ऐसे होता है. Okay. Now there is a small problem. If you see, there's a small mistake which I'm making here. Trigger.new, I say it returns a list of records. Do you read this? And here I say account A equals trigger.new. So don't you think it's not correct programming wise? Account A is what? Single S object record? It's not a list, right? This is not a list, but this is a list. So why trigger.new is a list? The data type of trigger.new is a list of records. Why? Why do you think it's going to return a list of record? Record in context is one single record here now. Then why does it return a list? Can anyone think about it? The answer
Because
is
this
pretty
is
simple.
something we need to check every time we insert the record.
No, every time to it will automatically do before insert. The reason why trigger.new returns a list because sometimes you might be doing a bulk data operation as well. Correct? So it's not always that you are going to process single record. Most of the cases, in fact, we process multiple records. Correct? Data loader, through data loader or through something else. You might be processing multiple records. So your trigger should work good when you are processing multiple records as well. Correct? If it is for a single record, if it takes this trigger.new takes only one record and checks only one record, then what will happen if someone is processing 100 records, it will check it for the first record and rest 99 will not be checked. Correct? So for that reason, trigger.new is always a list. Okay, so if it's a list, then what happens? Even if it's a single record, A list can return a single record as well. That list can just have one record inside it, correct? And even if there are 100 records, the list can hold 100 records. So that's the reason why the data type that it returns is a list of records, correct? So instead of writing it this way, what I have to write? I have to write it this way. Because now I'm talking about multiple records, I have to write a loop and I'll have to check it inside the loop. Okay. Small change. So for account A, okay, account A is just an instance of trigger.new, which is a list. I just want to check if the industry is education and then throw error. Okay. So this loop will run for each record in trigger.new. If trigger.new has 100 records, this loop will run 100 times. If it has 5,000 records, it should run 5,000 times. Tell me if that is fine. Clear? So trigger.new, the record in context is a list. What we are writing, we are just defining an S object A and we are checking it record by record for trigger.new, all the values in the trigger.new, and checking if the industry is education or not. So if the first record industry is not education, the record will get inserted. Second record, industry is not education, record gets inserted that way, right? Third record, industry is education, it will throw you an error. So that's again in case you have multiple records. If there is just one record, this loop will run only one time. So like in this case, if I try to save it here now, in industry, try to put it here, whatever industry, if I have to save it, this loop will run only once. Doesn't need to run multiple times because I'm just dealing with one single record here. Correct?
Jeet,
Hmm.
so are we saying that we are going to do just account A is equals to trigger dot new when there is one record or multiple records?
We are not going to do that at all. That was the wrong statement
Okay.
written. We are always going to write it this way. Fine.
Okay. Okay.
The point is that if you have, see, you cannot write two different triggers. That this will work when there will be one record and this will work when there will be multiple records. We are not going to do that, right? That's not.
Okay.
So what we are doing, we are making provision for multiple records. If there is one record, that will also be handled there, na?
Right. Okay.
So that's what we are trying to do.
Makes
So
sense.
we have written a loop. If there is one record, this loop will run only once, right?
Okay. Okay.
So that's what we are trying to do. We have just made the provision. We have written the code which works for single record as well as multiple records. That's what we have done.
Acha ji. Got you.
Make sense?
हाँ जी.
So all the triggers that you write should be written this way within a for loop. Okay. Um, why should we write trigger this way? Because trigger should be always a bulk trigger, or should be capable of handling bulk records. Because you don't want your trigger only to work when someone is performing insert on a single record. You want your trigger to perform when someone is inserting multiple records. Let's say a data loader. If someone is entering 1000 accounts from the data loader, you want your trigger to work that time also, right? So that's where trigger.new will have 1000 values and this will run the for loop 1000 times. If you don't write your for loop here, then what will happen? The first record will be checked and rest 999 records will not be checked. So that's something which we do not want. Correct? That's it. That's the logic. So concept wise, you should write a for loop for your trigger. Correct?
Did only one question.
Please do it.
Here I didn't get the basic syntax for loop because I really don't know. This is something very new to me.
Tell me, sorry, tell me again.
This syntax for loop syntax. This is something very new to me. I never get it.
For loop syntax.
Yes.
So okay. So what is the problem with this syntax? There is one record, or sorry, one value or a variable. I'm checking this variable for each value of this list. That's what this for loop is doing. That's how a single S object record can be run for a list of S object. That's how we write it here with a colon, right? Or if you say for contact C within uh, list of contacts. The list of contacts can have 20 records. C is one variable, and the values in the C will keep on changing from one by one. So, what is the problem with this syntax? The way we write for I equals, for I is equal to from 0 to 100, the same way. Each time the value in the C keeps on changing, and that's how we write it. This is list, and this is a single S object value or variable, S object variable in fact. And
Okay.
that S object variable, the values are changing. Is that
Okay.
clear now?
ये एक्चुअली वो बहुत कन्वेंशनल वे ही पता है जिसमें वो लेस देन इक्वल टू ऑपरेटर यूज करके देन वी आर यूजिंग कंपेयरिंग, तो यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा कंफ्यूजिंग लग रहा था कि
कुछ भी,
कैसे कंपेयर कर रहे हैं.
this is a list of records, okay, and this is one variable. I just want to check this variable for all these values. So this variable will get the values from this list of records. This is how we do it. If it was integer, then it would have been the same way, fine, but here it's not integer or something like that. Here it's S object and list of S object, correct? S object variable and list of S object. So that's what it is doing. It's actually gonna check each value under trigger.new, okay, and for that each value जो for I जो होता है वहाँ पे, that I instead of I we have defined as object A.
Yes, yes.
I mean, we don't have to go
Yeah.
and understand why this syntax this way, why not that way. We just have to understand the logic of the syntax. Syntax is to be understood, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is what is actually happening. Now let's not go into why is it not being written like that integer wala thing. That's not the story here, right? So let's focus on that. Are we able to understand what is happening? So if there is a list of values which need to be checked, or for which you need to run a loop, it should be written like this, because the loop will run for one record at a time. So define an S object variable. S object variable can have one value for this set of or list of records, and this loop will now run for all the values of trigger.new. So if all trigger.new has 1000 values, A will take value one by one and get execute for the entire set or entire list of records. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fine. So it's, I think it's a lot simpler syntax as compared to the other one that we are talking about, the traditional one, because there you have to put increments and all those statements, but here you don't have to do anything. It will automatically check for all the records in trigger.new one by one, okay, and it will check if the industry of that record. So in trigger.new, let's say there are, because I said this is a list of values, let's say there is A1, A2, A3. Okay, then let's say there are three values or three accounts which are being inserted in trigger.new. A1, A2 and A3. Now all that we have to do here is we just have to what my for loop will do, first of all, first time when it runs, when I say for account A in trigger.new, so when I'm saying this, first time A will be equals to A1, second time A will be equal to A2, third time A will be equal to A3. So first time when the loop runs, A will be equal to A1, it will check for A1, then for A2, then for A3. That's how it's going to be. Is that clear? All right. So now let me just copy paste this code in the trigger, in the Salesforce trigger. Copy it. Go to, okay, where do we create the trigger? For creating trigger, you have to go to setup, customize account triggers. Because it's an account trigger, you have to go to accounts, and there you will see triggers. Click on new, save it. Okay, so that's it. The trigger is ready for account, save it, and in case you want the trigger to work, you have to make sure that it is active. If you don't make it active, the trigger will not work. The code will get saved, but the trigger will not work. So keep it active, save it. Okay, account spelling mistake. For account at trigger dot new, line number 3, a dot industry.
शायद industry spelling. Industry
Industry
spelling.
spelling.
Industry. Okay. So before now an account record is saved, it will check if the industry is account education or not. So let's go and create a new account. Creating it for education. Save it. See, it throws an error. Not allowed. Correct. So that's how your trigger is actually going to throw you an error in case you do not, sorry, in case the industry is education, because that's what I've written. Now let me make it something else. Engineering. Now if I try to save it, will it allow me to save the record? Should I be able to save the record now because I've changed the industry to engineering?
Yes.
Okay, done. Yes, it allows me to save. Now if I edit this record and make it education again, okay, I saved it by making engineering. Now again I'm making it education. Now if I try to save it, will it throw an error?
Yes, it will save.
It
It's
will
an
save
update
or it will
statement.
throw error?
It will save.
Why will it save? Why will it not throw an error?
This is an update statement.
So I've written my trigger here now. I've written the trigger. The trigger should take care of that. Education should not be saved. Will it allow to save or not?
Yes.
It will allow to save. And the reason is
Yes. This is an update statement.
this is an update statement, and your trigger is working only on insert. Insert is when new record is being created. So when an old record is being updated, for that we have not put any check. So if you want to update the old record to education, it allows you to save, right? If you want the trigger to work at the time of a record being update also, then you should mention before update here. Now if you try to edit it and save it, now it will throw error. Why? Because now I've put my trigger to work before update as well. So now the trigger is working before insert as well as update. Is it clear? Are we okay on this?
Yeah.
So that is the thing. So whenever you want your trigger to get executed, you just define that particular event. If you say before insert, the trigger will only work before insert. If you say before update, the trigger will work only before update. If you want the trigger to work on both the situations, write both of them. Correct? All right. So that's what we are going to do today. Tomorrow, once we meet, we are going to discuss a little more about trigger, and we will also talk about the custom button of the Visual Course page. All right.